I'm black, you're white.
Now what? What if I say the wrong thing?
You probably will. Who doesn't? But I'll do my best to listen.
Maybe if we're humble enough to listen to each other.
Maybe if we're brave enough to lean into those difficult conversations.
We might.
We could.
Come up with some answers.
Make some real progress.
Discover how much we have in common.
And appreciate our differences.
Now you're talking.
I am David Conley, and I'm a communications consultant.
And I'm Chris Thurber. I'm a clinical psychologist.
And welcome to I'm Black, You're White, Now What? Now, our guest today, we're blessed to have with us Detective John Leggett from the St. Louis Police Department. We're going to have a great conversation with him. But just before we jump into that, I kind of want to do a little recap about what we talked about last week, Chris, and just kind of bring everybody up to speed. Last week we did an overview of kind of what this show is going to be about going forward, and just about how to have difficult conversations about a lot of the topics that are going on in society now, and how to have those conversations, really learn from each other, but still leave those conversations as friends.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was your idea to create this podcast, this webinar series, and I'm really grateful that you gave me a call and tapped me to join you. And I think that we both, like John, like probably most people in the country, have felt the tension that exists right now, and to just be sitting in that without doing anything is, not our style. So we're trying to model the candor, the civility, the leaning into the difficult conversations, as people frequently say, and the learning, because I think that we have so much to learn from each other, and I certainly believe that ignorance is at the core of any kind of prejudice. So I'm glad that we've started this, and I also wanted to share with our listeners and with the audience who may be watching this as a webinar, and a great thing for John to hear before you tell us more about him and we bring him into the conversation. Despite our clear goals, David, there was a moment in the episode that we debuted last week where you asked me how I personally felt about Black Lives Matter. And we discussed it a little bit. And my answer, which I wouldn't have really detected had I not listened to the show 4 or 5 times and had you pointed out, was a bit depersonalizing. I answered your question, but I answered in terms of, well, when I talk to my friends, this is what they say. And I am certainly going to try to do more personal answering of questions that are asked of me that are personal. Like that's part of what we're trying to do here, is be as real as we can, and maybe even we're good friends, call each other out on, I'm not sure you quite answered that one directly, Chris, or whatever it might be. So anyway, John, duly warned, but so happy that you're here. And maybe David can say a bit more, and you can share a bit more about your background. And then we've got a lot we're excited to talk with you about.
Absolutely. I'm glad that, we're able to have those kinds of conversations. And I do think it's important to, talk about all sides of the issue, but also to have people know like where we're personally coming from with it. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Jumping into the episode today, like I said, we're going to be talking with a longtime friend of mine, great guy, and also very community oriented as well. It's a 20-year veteran. I'll let him tell more about himself because I'm probably going to not do it all the justice it deserves. But 20-year veteran of the St. Louis Police Department, and like I said, very active as far as community involvement as well. We thought his perspective would be pretty unique and pretty interesting on some of the issues, particularly around the tensions between police and inner city, community. So welcome to the show, Detective John Leggett. Normally at this point we would have a great crowd going wild for you, but it's our second show. The budget is still small, but John, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, just so everybody's kind of up to speed as we move forward.
Okay. As you said, my name is John Leggett. I am a detective with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, where I have been in service for the last 20 years. I can honestly say I love my job. I love what I do. I don't like everything about my job or all the things that I have to do, but I love doing what I do, and that is helping people. I'm a juvenile detective, so that means I work with children. I work with kids who are abducted, who are kidnapped, who are runaways, work with some sex trafficking victims. So I'm right there in the thick of it. I say that I have skin in the game. Community policing is where it's at. I've always been a community policeman since the very beginning. It's about getting into neighborhoods and getting to know those people, getting to know their needs, and really helping people. So that's how I was raised. Born and raised here in St. Louis, Missouri. Alumnus of Lincoln University is where I met Dave Conley. LU. And
I hope you have some good stories. Just as a side note, we could do an episode.
Yes, we could do a whole episode.
That's our after dark episode.
I taught Dave how to make Roman noodles 5 different ways.
I know that's right. That's right. Survival.
Yeah. So, but born and raised here in St. Louis, wanted to be a police officer because I wanted to help people, and that's where I've been. I don't know how long I'll stay. We'll ride it until the wheels fall off, I guess. But that's just who I am. Currently, I am active with the Ethical Society of Police. I'm on the board of directors for the Ethical Society of Police, and that is the Black Police Association in St. Louis. Those of you who may not be familiar with St. Louis, there is a predominantly white police association, and then there is a predominantly Black police association for obvious reasons. And most cities have 2 police associations. But I'm a member of the board of directors, but I'm also a member of the St. Louis Police Association as well. I'm a member of that association as well. And I remain a member so that I can know what's going on. You don't have any say so if you don't, pay your dues and put some money in. So I go to their meeting and I want to find out and I want to know what it is you're doing. Involved in quite a few activities. Right now, I'm a member of a production called Antigone and Ferguson. That's what my T-shirt is. And that is a production that we've done for the last 2 years. We've been to Greece doing this production. It came out of the Mike Brown incident that happened in Ferguson. And Ferguson is just outside of the city of St. Louis. And it is a play, basically, the Greek play. Written by Sophocles, and we tied in Ferguson. If you know the story of Antigone, there were 2 sons. There was a king, he had 2 sons. They killed each other in battle, and all of that in terms of the body laying in the street, Mike Brown laying in the street. So this is a musical and a Greek play combined. And then there's a conversation very similar to what we're having right now that follows the play. And we've been touring this for the last 3 years, I believe. Wow. This is just right up my alley in terms of what I'm doing and where I am and where God has placed me at this point in time. So I'm happy to be here.
That by itself is very interesting.
Yeah, I want you to come to Phillips Exeter Academy, to the school where I teach and work as a psychologist. That'd be fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to your background and everything that you're doing, and man, it seems like you must feel like you're in the middle of like kind of a tug of war sometimes. I was just thinking about, like with law enforcement and the community, but even with these 2 societies or organizations within the police department, how do you, balance those 2 things, those 2 points of view, loyalties, whatever? How do you how do you balance that? It seems like that would be kind of like walking on a razor's edge.
Yeah.
No, in actuality, it's a good thing in terms of that I get to explain to, I don't want to say the other association or the other side. Mm-hmm. This is the reason why we are in existence. The things that you are not addressing is the reason why we need to. Mm-hmm. because that's the reason why the Ethical Society was formed, because the Police Association was not addressing needs of African American officers. They were not looking at things that were really affecting us, like promotions of African American officers, racial disparities in terms of racial profiling, just all the different things that African American officers were facing. They were not addressing them. So it affords me the opportunity to say, hey, this is the reason why we have this, because you're not doing this. And we have to call them on the carpet, quite a bit. So it's not a comfortable conversation. It's not always a comfortable interaction, but it's necessary. We have to stand guard and call those things out, to say, and even within our own organization, in terms of the Ethical Society, when things are not right, we call them. Wrong is wrong. It doesn't matter if it's white or if it's black. It's wrong. If a black officer does something wrong, or if a white officer does something wrong, it's still wrong. And we all took the same oath of office to uphold the law, regardless as to what color you are. So it makes for a very sometimes not so comfortable situation, but I can deal with that. I can handle that. I don't have a problem with calling them on that, or saying, hey, we got to do better than this. I can cite a number of things recently that the association, when I say the association, I mean the St. Louis Police Association, they did not address, and just kind of act like, it didn't exist.
Things that happened in the community or
within the department, within St. Louis. I don't know if you may not be familiar with St. Louis, but we've had a lot of unrest and we've had quite a few riots, and particularly after the George Floyd incident. But even prior to that, we've had a lot of protest and destruction, and our association has decided that they want to paint all protesters as destructive and destroying property, and we're like, no, that's not. Those two things are not the same, and so we've had to have some I guess as my grandmother would say, come to Jesus conversations.
And John, what's been their response? I mean, what I find fascinating, lots of things about what you said, but first of all, that you, as you said, it might be difficult conversations, but you're willing to have them, and hopefully they're willing to listen. I'm keen to know what their response is. And if you wanted to stay with this example, when you said, hey, look, it's a bit more nuanced than that. It's not that all protesters are violent or destructive, or that on a daily basis, whatever vandalism that's happening in the city of St. Louis, most of that doesn't have anything to do with any protest, so it's like you're confounding these things. How do they react?
Well, not so friendly, not so receptive to that. They keep wanting to clump everything together and everybody together. And that's one of the major things that one of the major components we've tried to explain and tried to break down and say that we have to look at the reason. Why are these people protesting? Number one, why are they protesting? They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. St. Louis made national news with there was a protest in the Central West End, which is a very nice area in St. Louis. You have $1 million homes. And they were going to the mayor's house. They were going to the mayor of St. Louis' house to protest. And they passed by some millionaires' houses, and they are lawyers. These are two lawyers. The lawyers pulled guns out on the protesters because they said they feared for their safety. Now, what those lawyers did was legal under the Castle Doctrine. You do have a right to defend your home. But was it ethical? Was it right? Because it's legal? And so that's one of the major things that we've been trying to explain to them. Yeah, what those lawyers did by pulling out guns and standing on their property, it was legal. But was it the right thing to do? Were those protesters tearing up their property? Were they on their property? No, they were in the street. Yes, the street is a private street. It's not a public street. And according to that law, you do have that right because you're on private property. Had they gone down a public street, then it would not have been an issue. But that particular street is a private street. So legally, yes, they were within their rights. But of course, that incited anger amongst the protesters, and so then you had this back and forth. And the lawyer said that some of the protesters pulled guns on them, but of course, we only have them on video with this AK-47 or this assault rifle, and then the wife's got this handgun that she's pointing at all the protesters. So trying to explain that yes, what they did was legal, but was it right?
Yeah.
And is there any understanding about, like what the feeling or the incidents were that across the country even, but also in St. Louis, that would have led to this protest in the first place? Because a lot of conversation that I'm hearing just, on the news and a lot of the response from the police is as if the protests came up like, yeah, let's find something to do on Saturday night. I know what we should do. Let's all go march on the mayor's house. Is there any sort of, and as a police officer, I guess this is a good question for you too, but is there any sort of thought about, like some of the behavior or some of the thinking that's coming from the behavior or the perceived behavior of the police that would probably have led to this? Do you know what I mean? Because like on the one side, these people protesting, of course, we feel like, unarmed black men are being killed, and that's not right either. So
Correct.
I'm curious to whether or not that's being considered and what the response to that is, if it's even being brought up.
Okay, let me back up. This particular protest that I was speaking of, when they were going on the private street and the lawyers and all that, they were going to the mayor's house to protest the mayor because she had gone on a Facebook Live and called out the names and addresses of citizens who wanted to defund the police. So she did something like this: Dave Conley, who lives at 3749 All Street, he wants to take $300,000, and she called their names out and their addresses. And so they were going to protest her house because they were calling for her resignation. Yeah. So two wrongs certainly don't make a right. What she did was wrong. That was wrong. And they certainly have a right to do that. And then for them to come out with the guns, that was wrong.
Right.
That's what I mean. Two wrongs don't make a right. But in terms of getting back to your question, part of the police response, or I shouldn't say our response, our understanding, is that we see protesters as, oh God, it was another protest. What do you all want now? Are we really truly listening to the people? Are we letting them know that we hear you? I'm not saying that everything that the police has done in the past is correct. We have to own our own stuff. Through generations and down through the years. Yeah, we've not done right by people all the time. So we've got to make it right. And I'm not saying we just go around and let people just break the law and just do what you want to do, and we give you a whole weekend to get all your lawlessness out. Starting at 12 o'clock on Friday, you can do whatever you want. No, I'm not. By no means am I advocating that. But we have to let people know that we hear you, we see you, and we are willing to listen and change. Just because it's the law doesn't mean that it's right.
But that brings up a good question. And being a black man and a police officer, like, what do you think it would take? What kind of response do you think the police can do that would make people in our inner city areas feel like they're being heard? I mean, because now a lot of even the reason that we're doing this show is a lot of times because of, like, I already feel like this, so there's really almost nothing you can say, because the minute the minute Chris starts talking to me, I have a bunch of assumptions about him as a white man and what he is thinking. And that assumption cannot be swayed. And he's thinking the same about me. So our conversation is stopped from the get-go. So if there's a a thing in protest or a community's mind about police and vice versa. What can we do or say? What kind of action can we take that can bridge this gap? Either way, really, you know.
I think that has to start from the top down. As any change has to start from the top and go down, meaning from the chief, from the mayor, from the governor, down to the very patrolman. Those guys that are out there on the street that are walking the beat. I was on the beat and had a beat to walk, and it starts there. It has to transcend from the top down to those officers, to go up to I'm just making this up, Miss Jones's house, and talk to Miss Jones and find out, what's going on with Miss Jones, and okay, Miss Jones, and develop their relationship. We've got to develop those and cultivate those relationships with people in the neighborhood so that they get to know us and we get to know them. We have to come up with real answers to the crime and to fighting and all of those things that we come into contact with on your daily patrol. We've got to get back to community policing. We've got to get back to really listening to people and really providing the people with the resources. We took an oath to protect and to serve. And I realized that we are not the fix-all. We are not social workers. We are not, we don't fix it all. But we do bear a responsibility that when you treat people a certain way, they're going to remember that. They're going to hold on to that. They may not remember what you did or how you look, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. So that's part of the policing that we've got to get back to. We got to get back to it being in your heart. No matter how much training we do, no matter how many classes we take, it has to start in your heart. You have to be right in your heart to know how to treat people. And living by that old adage of you should treat people the way you want your family members to be treated. So I think it's a combination of all those things. I don't think it's any one particular thing. I think it's just got to be a combination of all those things, as well as the community being able to come to the table and say, hey, we're here to be policed by you. How can we collectively come together and do this thing together? So it's got to be a give and take. It's not a one fix all. I'm not trying to put all of the blame on the police and say, oh, well, the police, we got to fix it. We just got to fix it. No, it's got to be a partnership. It's got to be community as well as the police. We both have a part to play. A lot of it is pride. A lot of it is afraid to say we were wrong on both ends, on the community side as well as the law enforcement side. And how do we fix this? How do we make this thing work? And I think having conversations like this, without having the hostility and without having the animosity, and actually listening to that person, letting them know that, hey, I hear you. Now, how do we get back to this? How do we fix this? How do we, so that would be my suggestion. I don't have a fix all to say, oh, well, we can wave the magic wand and it's all going to be right. It's got to be a give and take.
John, what was it like when you started 20 years ago and were doing more community policing, and what caused it to change? And I guess answer, for your experience in St. Louis, maybe different factors in different places, but it sounds like from what you were saying, if the way in which police officers interacted with people were to get back to something, closer to what you had, why it sounds like what brought you to the force in the first place. So I want to hear what that was like and why it changed.
I think part of the change is the urban development. You don't have as many neighborhoods. Dave is from St. Louis. I can name neighborhoods in St. Louis where, for instance, where my mother's house was, her house is the only house on the block. It is the only inhabitable house on the block. When I came on 20 years ago, we had more houses on the block. You had Miss Jones, who been living there all her life, and you had Miss Smith, and the Johnsons, and you had neighborhoods. You had people who were in those neighborhoods. So I was able to develop a relationship. I remember particularly one lady called me to her house. She was an older lady, and she called me to her house to give her some water. And I was like, "Lady, I'm the police. What do you mean you want me to get you water?" But I developed a relationship with her. She just wanted someone to talk to. And she would call 911 and she would ask for me. And of course, sometimes I was working, sometimes I wasn't. But I started just going by on my own, not even without her calling. And then I would sit on the porch with her and just talk with her. So we had neighborhoods. You had people who you were able to develop relationships with. Now we don't have as many neighborhoods because we have so many vacant lots and derelict houses and full blocks. You can have full blocks where there are no houses. We had schools. We had schools in the area, and you would go by and develop relationships with those teachers and those principals and those students. Now we've shut down schools. So that's something that I grew up in. I grew up in North St. Louis, the hood, the Ville.
Come on.
So,
Preach.
So I grew up in that type of culture of a neighborhood, but now we don't have those neighborhoods anymore because of drugs and crime, and people have moved out to the suburbs, or people have died who've owned houses for many, many years, and that family is no longer there. So I think that's one of the major issues in terms of that. Those officers can't cultivate those relationships because there are no people in those houses.
Yeah.
And people have gotten away from a sense of neighbors. You knew who your neighbors were. The whole block. Now you can go into a neighborhood and you go to find out about a neighbor and they say, I don't talk to them. I don't know them. So I think that's something that I certainly was accustomed to. So it was kind of a natural, it was kind of an instinct for me to go into, the neighborhoods. And I would literally park my car at the end of the street and just walk down the street, go from house to house and, and talk, and get to know people. But officers have not afforded that opportunity now. For one, they're going from call to call to call to call to call to call for calls for service, that they don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So when you start talking about, first of all, there's two questions. One, so if that's the case now and that's the landscape, I mean, how do you get back to community policing then? I mean, it sounds like a great answer, but I mean, if the community is so eroded, how do you get back to community policing?
And that's where it's going to take it. When I say we've all got to come to the table, we've got to do some urban development. We've got to get money back in these neighborhoods to get these families stabilized. We have tons. I'm just speaking for St. Louis, and I can only speak for St. Louis because it's the only thing I know in terms of policing. We have blocks of just houses, wonderful brick houses that could be fixed up and, families could be brought back into those houses. Now we have started this program where if you take care of the lot or the house next to where you live, you could buy it for like $50, or they have the house where you can buy for $1. That's a start, but those houses take a lot of resources, but that's got to start with our city to allow, come up with grants, come up with different types of incentives for people to live in the city and to own houses in the city. We do have a first-time buyers program. That's a really good program here in St. Louis. They give you like $10,000 towards a house. Things like that. That's my point, is that the city, our state, our government, we've got to get back to putting money back into our neighborhoods to further develop our neighborhoods so that we can get back to that community policing. I'm certainly not saying that it's all the responsibility of the police. By no means. No, we can't do it alone. But it's got to be a collective.
It's cool to hear you talk about the different components, and as we said at the top of the show, a more nuanced view of all kinds of things, including anti-Black racism, is what is required if we're going to come up with some sort of durable solution. And David, I know you said you had another question, but before you ask that, your commentary, John, makes me realize, even more profoundly than I did before, that people who are calling out of frustration to defund the police at a local level, at a national level, are, if anything, it's a vast oversimplification of what is a nuanced problem with a multivariate solution. Like, there's a lot of moving parts here, but it's also really important for people to hear what you're saying are those parts. That it's not rocket science, right? It's relationships, it's thoughtful urban planning, it's if anything, the way that police are funded. A lot of them making an hourly that's less than what they would make if they, were working at a big box department store, or, and they're showing up for work tired because they're having to work another job, or, and the body cam thing is really interesting because, and I'm not taking a stand for or against, but, to just to say, well, the solution to some of the tension is to document what is happening. Okay, that's part of it. That's not the only thing. As you said, John, people have to start with what's in their heart. And you can do all the workshops in the world, and you're still not going to get there unless we bring it down to some basic level of humanity. And I don't mean to sound glib, because it can't be easy to do urban planning. It can't be easy to rebuild some of these relationships, some of these neighborhoods. But as you're saying, relationships are at the core, and you're describing a kind of interaction between law enforcement and citizens that would make it not just sort of solve some of the problems that exist right now with the way some undertrained or stressed out, officers have been treating people and killing people, but also, it's just, there's so much more there that we need to do to listen to one another. And I want to repeat something you said, which is to bring lots of members of the community to the table. And you also said the leadership starts from the top, and I guess it's a whole nother show, the sort of problems that we have right now nationally with leadership at the top. But I am encouraged by the directness of the parts of your answer, because again, it doesn't sound impossible. It sounds very doable, and it sounds wonderful. Like, it sounds that people would be able to walk down the street, whatever the street is, and have a better day because they can say hi to somebody, or it's that people know each other. We've dehumanized so many parts of society, and then we scratch our heads going, "Oh, so why the hell isn't it going smoothly?"
Right.
What was your other question, David?
I was gonna get to the defund the police part, but it's interesting. I think they need a different phrase for that, because I think it scares people when you say defund the police, because what that puts in people's mind is that they're going to take people like John off the streets. And I think my understanding of defunding the police is taking some of the money and doing what you're talking about,
right,
directing it into the rebuilding of resources for communities, sort of undergirding some of these communities so that officers aren't consistently going on, so many calls that by the time they get to these emergency calls. They're stressed out. They're able to be utilized for
Yes.
the calls that they are best trained for, and so you don't have this, just deluge of calls that you got to wade through and that don't give you time to do the type of community policing that John was saying he did when he first.
Oh, and totally
came
unfair
on.
that you're
And
being
so,
asked to do things that, as you said, John, a social worker should be doing, or that, you can't be expected, no profession can be expected to solve all of society's ills. And it's just vastly unfair that officers are asked to do so many different things.
And so I guess my question to John with regard to that was, if that's what's needed, you're able to see that that's what's needed, uh, and this is, you of course living in the community and working with the police for over 20 years, but still, I would think that people who are working in the police, in these areas can see this as well. Why is there so much pushback, you think, uh, for the notion of defunding the police, if that's what it means? It seems like it would make the job more effective for police, and it would help with regard to bridging this sort of gap that's come as a result of communities going away in that way, or eroding, I should say, in that way. If defunding the police is a way to help make that happen, maybe you call it something different, but other than the name, I'm saying, if that action is what I'm talking about, it seems like that would be doing what it is you're saying, or at least heading in the direction of what you're saying is a solution. Why is there so much pushback nationwide, do you think? Or even, we'll just say you answer for St. Louis, but I'm just saying it might give us some insight nationwide. Why is there so much pushback and vehement pushback from law enforcement, do you think?
Well, let me give you two things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of defunding the police. The name defunding the police.
Right.
I think that I like police reform.
Okay.
I like other things other than defunding the police, but let me speak up on St. Louis. For instance, in St. Louis, 90% of our budget is salaries and benefits.
Okay.
Only 10% is equipment. We have to have cars, we have to have guns, we have to have uniforms, we have to have buildings. So only 10% of our budget. And so when you're talking about defunding the police, you're going to take some money from the police to put in these various resources for housing and job training and homelessness and all of those things, all these calls that we get calls about. I agree. We should not be addressing that. I am not a social worker. My background is not in social work. We should not be answering those calls on custody disputes for people who are unemployed and who need housing. I agree, but why not properly fund all of those agencies and all of those things from the start? Or as my grandma would say, from the get-go.
Right.
Properly fund them from the start. And I'm only speaking from St. Louis.
Sure.
If 10% of our budget is equipment and you want to take some money out, where if you think you don't see a police officer now in your neighborhood, you're going to take money out of the budget. If 90% is salaries and benefits, and in the city of St. Louis, we don't make a lot of money. There are municipalities who make twice as much as I do in St. Louis. I'll say surrounding areas that are much nicer areas. So they make twice the amount of money that I do. Of course, if you take money from me, what am I going to do? I'm going to leave the city and I'm going to go work for one of those agencies. So my answer to the whole defunding the police, and I'm specifically talking about St. Louis because I really don't see how they could take money out of our budget. The FBI says that we should have 1,200 police officers for a city the size of St. Louis. How many officers do you think we have for the city of St. Louis?
2.
About roughly on a good day, about 700, 600.
Wow. Okay.
So if we don't, and the money is not in the budget, the city budget, to fund those additional officers from 700 to 1,200, the difference. So if we don't have that money already, and we're below the mark already, how then do we explain defunding anything?
Mm-hmm.
If anything, we need to pour money in so that we can at least get those 1,200 officers. And let's say we had the money in the budget, the city budget, to hire those additional officers so that we're fully staffed at 1,200 officers. Or let's say we have 2,500 officers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to really go all out there. Okay, well then we can explain, well, 1,200 to 2,500, we can make some cuts here.
Mm-hmm.
So
but you're already at a deficit.
We're already at a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So how then do we explain, so it just definitely will not work for the city of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. So if you were at a deficit, and I'm hearing that with regard to, say, just the numbers in manpower, I would imagine, and you don't have that kind of money, that you were at a deficit in training too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But okay,
so I mean, it's all the way around. You can only get so much. You can't get blood from a turnip. So I agree. It's all the way around. Equipment, the types of cars we drive. I mean, and I'm sure I know teachers all the time. They say they spend their own money, for the students. I've spent my own money for my own equipment. Mm-hmm. We have officers who bought, purchased their own or additional ballistic vest, mm-hmm. or purchased their own equipment. Because
I know you were saying you had to put an alternator in your car just last week.
Yes, I did. I sure did.
That you paid for.
No, exactly.
Wow.
But no.
No, I'm kidding. That's a joke.
Right. But when we talk about defunding the police, I get it. I understand. Yes, we do need those resources so that we're not going to these calls, trying to play social workers and what I call Band-Aid. Band-Aid answers. Here in St. Louis, we do have a program, and we've been innovative in this. I think we're probably one of the first police departments to institute this program, and we're calling it Professionals with Police, whereas we will have social workers, licensed clinical social workers, with our officers, riding in the cars or either at the station. My office, we have a social worker in our office. She has a cubicle. She's there, I believe, 30 hours a week, so that we can funnel her families that we come into contact who are having problems with food, or having problems with utilities, having problems with job training, having problems with childcare. So these licensed clinical social workers will be riding with the officers. So then when they go to a domestic call, and if there's a woman there or a man who's been abused, and we know we're coming to this house every 2 weeks, when she gets paid, this is when the fight starts. So that social worker can then get them the necessary help that they need. And then that officer can then go on to the next a call where he or she is really needed. So that's an innovative program that we have. It's called Pairing Professionals with Police. And it's a groundbreaking program, just getting off the ground here in St. Louis. But we use our advocate, and I don't like to call them social workers. I call them family advocates, because there's a certain kind of connotation that goes along with stigma that goes along with social worker. So if I say family advocate, I find that families are a little more receptive, because that means that they advocate for the entire family. But they are licensed clinical social workers. And I love our family advocate, because she really goes above and beyond to make sure that she helps, those families.
One question I got, just really quick, and okay, so just so Chris is up to speed too, an area like you were saying, Kirkwood, or like Ladue or whatever we call some of these areas out, they're like more suburban areas or whatever. The types of things that you see, the types of issues that we're dealing with, nationwide, that's a source of contention between police and these communities. That kind of thing does not seem to exist in those areas. I'm asking you about St. Louis because you're from St. Louis, but I would imagine, we can apply this across the country. What would be the difference in how you police, or how that's being done, how the community is being dealt with, or whatever, in the city of St. Louis? You know what I mean? That where that type of tension is almost expected in that area, and not necessarily in these other areas. Like, so we say, okay, well, St. Louis is operating at this deficit of personnel and resources, etc. Meanwhile, crime is neighborhoods are eroded, crime is out of control, etc. So they're having to deal with a lot of things like that, I'm sure. But I'm saying, I don't know. If you leave St. Louis and go to one of those areas, you're going to be you're going to not have to deal with a lot of that kind of thing. But what would be the difference between how they're policing or whatever, or what they have to deal with, and what you have to deal with, or how you police?
Well, policing in I'll just give you this example. Policing in North St. Louis, I probably would not police the same, because I'm not going to deal with the same issues that I would be in North St. Louis, as opposed to, let's say, the really nice part of Clayton, which is a really nice suburb of St. Louis. It's a very affluent area, very, wealthy people live there. I'm not going to deal with the same issues. I'm dealing in North St. Louis. I'm dealing with inner city. I'm dealing with more crime. I'm dealing with drugs. I'm dealing with violent crime, as opposed to some of these other areas. I mean, and violent crime is up all over the country, I should say that. But just the basic day-to-day issues that you're going to deal with, you're not going to deal with them the same type of issues. So am I going to police the same? No, because I'm dealing with homicides and suicides and heroin overdoses and things like that in this area, as opposed to this other area, this very affluent area. I'm dealing with maybe an accident, maybe a domestic, maybe a domestic dispute. So you've got apples and oranges,
right? But somebody might not to cut you off, but somebody might try to oversimplify that, for instance, and say, well, in Clayton it's mainly white people, and in this hood it's mainly black people, and that's your problem.
No,
this is black people, and so you got to police black people this way. This is white people, and you got to police them this way.
No, I don't agree with that, certainly, because you're the police of all people, regardless if they're black or white. And if you treat people fair and right, regardless as to what color they are, it does not matter whether they're black or whether they're white. Crime is crime. You have two different types of elements, more violent crime, as opposed to you just got, oh, Miss Jones, my cat stuck in the tree or something. You don't walk out there with your gun and you want your cat down.
Right.
I'll get it down for you.
Yeah.
So
next call. Next call.
Right. Yeah. Right. Dispatcher, what you got next for me?
Right.
But you treat people fair. You treat people right from the get-go. We see that here in St. Louis. You may have an officer in St. Louis who is maybe a white male from a predominantly white area. He's not dealt with a lot of black people in the past or where he was from. And we all take our life experiences, even though you go through the academy and you get your license and you do all of that training, but you still fall back to your experiences. Have you had experience with dealing with black people? That's something that we need to consider. If you take a black person, a black cop, and put him in a predominantly white area, and I've not dealt with very many white people in my experience. So I only have my experiences, my life experiences to draw off of. So we have to be conscious of that. And I'm not saying that only white cops should patrol white people and only black cops should patrol black people. I think it should be across. We should, that goes back to our training. We have what they call field training. And in your field training, you stay in one area. So what we're trying to do is to develop that when you have your field training, that you go to all different areas so that you know how to police all over the city. So if I put you in a predominantly black area, you only deal with mostly black people. If I put you in a white area, you only deal with, but if we can give you a mixture and so that you're able to get to know all people, you don't have as much friction and as much, I guess, maybe cultural shock. Oh, black people, really? You all really don't, or, I mean, it's a reality.
John, how have, and I am aware that you've got to stop here in a couple of minutes. so I want to respect your time. How have white people treated you over the course of your career?
In terms of citizens or fellow officers, or what do you mean by that?
Both.
Yeah, both. I mean, yes.
I am probably I'm your typical cop, but I'm not your typical cop, and Dave will know this. I'm the type of cop that'll give you a ticket, a speeding ticket, and you're laughing because that's just my personality. I've had white people who were just steaming mad at me, but I had them laughing because I ran up to the car and I said, "Where's the fire? Fire. You driving so fast? Where's the fire at?" You know, and so I got them laughing, but at the end of the day, I gave them the ticket.
Yeah.
You know, so I've had some resistance from white people, but I've also had some resistance from black people as well. Just because I'm a black man doesn't mean necessarily that all black people, oh, they just love, they just love me because I'm a black, cop.
Right.
But I think I know how to talk to people, and I made it a practice to always treat people the way I want to be treated, to treat them with respect. There are times that, yes, I'm frustrated and I want to beat the heck out of you. That's just, I'm human.
Yeah.
I'm human. And that's another aspect of the police that people need to see, that we are human just like anybody else. We get frustrated, we get upset. But the thing about it is you have to be able to control that. You have to be able to turn that around, and you have to be able to not take it personal. So yes, I've had white people where I've responded on a call with a white officer, and white people will only talk to the white officer. They will literally turn away from me. And once I figured that out, me, of course, Dave, me being the person that I am, you have to talk to me now because I have more seniority than him.
Right. Exactly.
But you learn how to turn that around, and you learn how to provide the best service that you can. I've had black people who, call me all types of Uncle Toms, or you're working for the man, and you're a sellout, and I have thick skin.
Wow.
I can turn that around. It's about how you talk to people. It's about how you treat people. It's about the level of respect that you require of them. I'm not going to allow you to make me stoop to your level. I'm going to require that with you now, if you got to go to jail, you got to go to jail. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. But one thing we know for sure, it's going to get done. But it's just the way you talk to people. And that's what I tell younger officers, man. It's the way you treat people. And it's in here, man. It's in your heart. Like I said at the beginning of the show, you can make us take all these diversity training and racial biases and all of these classes. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to tell you what I need to tell you to get out of this class, to get my name, to get my credit. But if my heart has not changed, there's not a change in my heart. And I always say this, that people don't become officers. Racists don't become officers to be racist. You're already a racist, and you become an officer because it's easy to exercise your racism because you have that power. So you don't automatically become an officer and then, oh, now I'm a racist. No, you were a racist before you became an officer. And that's all that again goes back to your heart. It's the same thing with the whole Catholic priest thing. People think, okay, well, you're a priest, you gotta be, you're abusing children. No, you had that in you already, and you became a priest because it was easy to do that, or you further developed that. So one does not necessarily equate to the other.
It's everything you just said, John, so beautiful and so memorable. And I think that institutions or groups are so easy to target. It's a problem with the police or the Catholic Church or this group that has this skin color, or that's, it's white people's fault, it's black people's fault. Like, all of that is so much easier than saying, what have I contributed to this mess? And what can I do to fix it? And to, as you said, see what's in your heart. No, there's no amount of money or number of workshops that's going to fix that. So I know we have to let you go in a minute, and I'll let David close out the show. And if you have other comments, please add them. But I am hoping that you'll join us again because there's lots more to
Definitely.
talk about,
Yes,
John.
yes.
No, we appreciate your time, brother, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for coming on. I mean, I learned a lot myself just
Me too.
listen to you just about that perspective, and I'll just be honest. I never had a blanket negative uh, thought about police in general. I think that, like you said, there are people who are, uh, have that negativity in them, and they happen to be police, just like they are uh, in all different types of vocations and what have you. So I never had just a blanket thing that was like that. But this helped me even more so to understand that there are a lot of people who are doing a very good job and want to do an even better job, and given the right circumstances and resources, would do that. And it's incumbent on all of us to try and make the entire situation better, as opposed to saying you fix it for me and I'll just sit back and wait until you do. But anyway, I say that to say I commend you, and my respect level for you went up. So now it's at 2. No, I'm just kidding. But I love you. It went up.
Spoken like a true college buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, he's my boy. And but really, it went up a lot in my understanding about several things. Went up, and so I appreciate your time and your insight today, and thank you very much. And
Definitely.
we do have to have you on again because there's a lot of other
Definitely.
things that I still kind of got questions about and would like to have some insight and answers to, and I think that you could help us all to see things a little bit better. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me on. I look forward to coming back. I don't have all the answers. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I do have a loving heart. I have compassion. I have a desire to serve people, and I think that is worth its mountain gold. And
Indeed.
I'll be more than happy to come back.
John, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
We'll get to see you again.
All righty, good night.
Thanks, John. Thank you for listening to I'm Black, You're White, Now What?
You can find more episodes on the podcast channel Teaching What It Takes, available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.
To learn more about the work I do, visit www.preparingthepath.com.
And to learn more about the work I do, visit drchristhurber.com.